Hi, that got me really you know when I got excited? You know when I got excited?
I'm not going to guess. I want you to tell us. I think we may have got excited. Same place we all got excited.
When the original came through, something went through my spirit. It was okay, but when Stevie came and hit that note, that magic. And first of all, hi, we are for some reason twin. We didn't plan this. Did we plan this? Did we?
I ain't get to know. I got the Urea 3-pack narrative Nubia refill with my Nubia refill joint. We are rolling with force. I love that green.
Good morning. Yeah, I love it too. I love it too. So, couple of things. We titled this "Movement in Memory." Coolio died Wednesday, and 59 years old, young, older than both of us, but young.
No question.
And I think about he didn't know about Stevie Wonder's song. Did you know he wasn't aware of Pastime Paradise?
Well, yeah, he said his mama had the record, but what was I forget the first one. He said he had Stevie Wonder record, but it wasn't that one.
Yeah.
Right.
That song Pastime Paradise was on Songs in the Key of Life, which was I think definitely won a Grammy. It was I think the album of the year. But that song itself didn't sell a lot of copies, right?
No.
Gangsta's Paradise, 3 times platinum, Song of the Year, Grammys, all of this.
And a billion views on YouTube. One of the few songs with a billion views. Can you believe it? Not a million. A billion. I said, this got to be a misprint.
But you know what? That is what we've been talking about. Now, all I was thinking about was baton passed. Stevie wrote. I mean, he was one of the producers of that song, that Gangsta's Paradise, right? So there was no disconnect. It wasn't like, Robin Thicke and them taking Marvin Gaye's, and just running with it and not giving any homage. It's like Luther and my friend Teddy Van doing Love, Power, and Power of Love winning a Grammy. That's like you bring that. You have to bring it forward. And so I was just like, yes, Coolio passed. The song gave new life to Stevie, which is great. And he's still here and allowed us to appreciate it even more.
Stevie moves on. Stevie goes on. And you know what's funny? He many years ago, Brother Ivy, artist Leon Ivy Jr., also known as Coolio, gave an interview to Rolling Stone where he said, and it was beautiful, like you say, this in our cultural meaning making category and ways of knowing, how do we create? We even individual moments of genius are collective. So just like Michael Jackson was hanging out in the studio in Detroit in Motown, and Stevie Wonder helped Michael Jackson learn instrumentation, learn how to play around with a lot of the instruments, because that's what had been done for him in that same space when he was much younger, a kid. Michael Jackson, of course, who said that Songs in the Key of Life, in his opinion, was Stevie's best album ever. Michael Jackson said, but when they recorded that, I forget the producer's name. The brother's name. But anyway, the cat Sanders, LV, Larry Sanders, who's singing on that, who actually on the album, apparently on the song rather, Gangsta's Paradise, sang all the parts initially, laid down all the tracks. He said, I sang all those parts. So you sound like a choir, but it's one dude. They were in there, and the brother is Rashid, Doug Rashid. Doug Rashid is the producer. They over his house, and they're coming up with this. He got a record collection. He put out Songs in Your Life. They play Gangsta's Paradise. LV is like, wow, what is that? So they come up with this song. And then they're like, we need somebody to rap on this. So apparently, like the Far Side, a bunch of other different hip hop artists were hanging out over there. They're making music. Again, this is our period. Now, this isn't, every generation makes its cultural meaning making. The difference, as we know, between cultural meaning making and movement and memory is what endures across generations. So everybody does this. Timbaland and them, Missy and them, they're out in Virginia, Teddy Riley and them, they're doing it. So Doug Rashid and them, and all these brothers and sisters around. So they said, well, they went through a couple of iterations. They said, well, let's get Coolio. And remember, one of Coolio's things was he would take songs from the previous generation, and because remember, he had Fantastic Voyage. That was a year before that. So he was already known. So they said, well, let's get him. And the way at least Coolio tells Rolling Stone, He came up with the lyrics for Gangsta's Paradise in one sitting, which we often hear, but he started it with the 23rd song. As I walk through the shallow valley of the shadow of death. It's like, what are you doing? He said, I'm going to start with the 23rd Psalm. And as he talks through the 23rd Psalm, he's really describing the social structure. I take a look at my life and I realize there's nothing left. Because, because I've been blasting and laughing so long that even my mama thinks that my mind is gone. In other words, this whole, and so they lay it out. It's beautiful. Here's the problem, though. Where are we going to place it? So apparently the way the interview went, the way he tells the story, Disney approaches them. They wanted the song for, it was Bad Boys, one of Martin Lawrence's, but they didn't want to pay enough. So here come this movie they made, Dangerous Minds. Black people who have no tradition of education, who have no teachers, who are basically an ignorant, subhuman race, waiting on someone to teach us our letters and numbers and learning and stuff, must have a white savior. So here come the latest white teacher savior coming into the hood to help Black people. And it was Michelle Pfeiffer this time, who of course was hot. And they made this movie, Dangerous Minds. They paid them. And so they had screen tested the movie, apparently. And the movie was not getting high marks. When they put the song in, the movie all of a sudden doubled its rating because the people liked the song. What? Oh my God. But here's the problem, as you say, they hadn't cleared it with Stevie. So the way Coolio tells the story, his wife knew Stevie Wonder. She approached Stevie Wonder, and because the company had approached Stevie Wonder, he was like, nah. You're not going to use my song for no gangsters. The wife talks him into, he said one thing, I want no cussing. Take the N-word out, take the cussing out. And then, okay, you're going to love this because, again, the song is called, at least Coolio's song, Gangsta's Paradise. But the true G is Stevie. Stevie asked for and got 95% of the publishing role. He didn't get half he didn't get a quarter. He didn't get just a writer's credit. 95%. Can you imagine that? Coolio says, I have known then. Yeah, of course you can imagine. This guy been in the business since he was in single digits. He's seen Berry Gordy in there. He's seen the best to ever do it. This is governance structure. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I didn't know what, we were going to talk about today because we don't pre-do this. We don't have any kind of conversation beforehand. So there's a few things. Yesterday, I had the honor of speaking with Kwame Alexander.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't know I would love him as much as I ended up loving him. I didn't know. I come in, I don't know nobody, Dr. Carr. I just, I was like, oh, who's on? Okay.
All right. That's signifying. If you're in the governance formations, y'all know what that is. If you're from the social structure, let me translate it for you. She knows everybody, but she's trying to make sure she ended the story. I'm just helping y'all because this more and more people are watching this. It's blowing my mind how many people I see. Oh, watch it. But oh, really? Anyway, so please go on. So you didn't know. You don't know nobody yet.
I don't know. And so I had my class yesterday. I decided to let them come in. Previously, I was interviewing Patina Miller, who's in one of those Power. She plays the Mother Rock, who I love this particular Power because it brings me back to the 90s and Queens and drugs and Tommy Montana and the whole, I used to cover this when I was at the Daily News. So yeah, so I was like, this is nostalgic for me and I love the character. But 2 times now she's not shown up with my class sitting there. So I was like, yeah, I'm just telling the backstory, or she didn't want the camera on or whatever. And you know me, I'm unbothered as it relates to this because, and I was saying to my class, we don't need these interviews, I'm grateful to have a platform, but I literally could talk for 3 hours and this was a pre-tape, so it's not live and it was okay, right? Okay. So he was late and I was telling my class, I was like, I don't really know this guy. So if he shows up, fine. If he doesn't, I'm gonna bring my producer in. We'll have some sort of class around, what we do when these things happen. And so I was trash talking to him before he came in. I know maybe he could hear me because they were in the studio. So he comes in. I don't know if he heard me or not. And me, I'm unbothered. But he comes in with such reverence and energy. And we are talking about publishing. His daddy used to have a publishing, and I'm thinking Paul Coates, but even before Paul Coates. And I'm like, So I asked him this question that set him on his ass. And I was like, your dad had this publishing house and you had a publishing house. And now you got these books and you publishing with Hachette. Have you sold out? And he was like, oh, are we doing this? So he said, he's like, and I was like, yeah, because, what is it that, is it the money? Is it the resources? I mean, the ability to distribute. Why haven't we become one of the big four when it's our content right now that, I mean, if you look at the bestsellers list, Dr. Carr, if you look at it, it's us. All they're buying right now is us. Some of your friends, some of the people I don't really know, have a lot of book deals. They're making a lot of money. And I'm like, at what cost? At what cost? So we're giving away our content. So we were having this comment, and he was processing it. And I'm like, I wonder, because one of the reasons why Narrative was founded was to do exactly that, right?
Yes.
It evolved because Narrative is about telling our stories. And I was going to, come back into publishing after being with Simon & Schuster for 10 years and take them out. That was my goal. Let me just be transparent, because not take them out, because that's a melanemic way of looking at the world.
No.
Take our rightful place.
Exactly. Take what's ours.
So he was thinking, and I don't know where it's going to land with him, but I'm looking at all of the powerhouse books right now, and I know how much money is made because I was on the other side of it publishing. So I know
they can't lie to you.
You can't, but I know how much money you're making. So when do we make that move to reclaim? Because they're still orchestrating. Well, if you would just make it a little more of this or a little less that, or, what about this or what about that? And I'm like, no, just be all of you. We, this week in Nubia, screened a film by one of the hosts on Urban View, Omi Bell. She has entrepreneurship is a boxing match. And we got to screen her, and she has a mural in DC. She has a mural. 2 murals, actually. I mean, huge. She had to deal with Nike to do this, and she funds Black women in business. And she's working on her book, and she asked me a question, and I was like, put your face on it. Do what you. It's your book. It's your book. How do you want to present yourself 100 years from now? So we were sitting there, and I'm watching this documentary, and I was like, she's coming up with all of these titles that she thinks will be acceptable. I said, the title is the title. Entrepreneurship is a boxing match. Each chapter now, ding, ding, let's go. Have some boxing reference. And in real time, she was like, okay, but we're so conditioned. Will they accept it? It doesn't matter. Right. Whether they accept it, they're already stealing from us and our
Great stealing.
I mean, it's like, and then I see little Keke Palmer. I call her little Keke Palmer.
Of course.
She's starting her own network. And I was like, yes, all of this. Yes. She's got her own network. Yes.
All of it.
I feel like it's our time.
It's been our time.
Yeah.
We give ourselves as the famous Hollywood filmmaker told Haile Gerima. This guy's now made transition, but I'm still not going to name him in this moment. He said, I wish they would give me permission to make a movie like Sankofa. And Haile was like, what? I gave myself permission. What are you talking about? They gave you. They don't give you permission to do anything. And that's very powerful. And in fact, we are doing it. We're doing it now. I mean, again, the quiet part is leaking out loud a little. So the people who are coming into this space, or who are aware of observing this space, you just listen to the language around. You can see the language shifting, and that's fine. Because pouring a clean glass of water doesn't include sending it to the EPA for testing. No, we know what clean water is. We the first people on the planet who know what clean water is. So we'll pour it. We're not getting in no ideological debates. Any debates and conversations we're having in here. So those who aren't yet in the Nubia formation, or for whatever reason, you didn't see what we led with this morning, which was, of course, the 1995 Billboard Awards. And in a little bit of glimpse of when we talked about the Keke Palmer interaction between governance and social structure a couple of weeks ago, here's Luther Vandross announcing Coolio winning the Song of the Year at the Billboard Awards, and here's Kenny G trying to blow his little echo horn in the middle of the announcement, and Luther Vandross, unbothered, doesn't break or even look over there or acknowledge that that little whiny sound is coming out of Kenny G's little whiny embarrassment horn. And he passes it off to, I mean, I hear, nobody want it. I'm not even going to acknowledge you said you did that. You just, you know, you just can't help it, Kenny Jimmy Fallon. I mean, Kenny G. I mean, whoever to get in on the swag. But if you didn't see that, you know, maybe we could put that in. Somebody will put it in the on the YouTube side in the chat, maybe. But the whole interaction, because like you say, Coolio and LV come out and they do the song the way that they saw it in the movies, that people made this huge smash song. And then, you know, they do the couple of choruses and you hear LV singing, you know, been living most of my life, living in a gangster's paradise. And then he goes into that hook, right? I mean, LV, who, you know, wrote that hook, and he asked the question. He says, you know, tell me why are we so blind to see that the ones we hurt are you and me. So he sings that twice, and as you say, Karen, then you hear that unmistakable voice from the back, and you realize it's not LV, and you hear the litany. See, Songs Kid Life 1976. The historians, dead ass wrong, as usual, say, well, this is near the end of the Black Power era. The Black Power era began when you put your hands on us in Africa, and it continues to today. But I know what you mean. By 1975, 1976, you see some kind of dissipation of some of the formations that we associate and affiliate with Black Power, but they hand it off to the next generation. Now, if you're in the governance formation, you know the impact of the 1950s and 60s. It continues to this day, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But Songs in the Key of Life emerges at a moment when it is no longer the 1960s. It isn't even the early 70s where Stevie Wonder is recording, where Marvin Gaye is recording, where Curtis Mayfield and Isaac Hayes, and we've talked about all those things before. But when you hear Gangsta's Pastime Paradise, which of course Stevie Wonder's single song, it in many ways defines the social structure. And as Stevie Wonder has said himself about that song, it's part kind of a retrospective on the previous decade and the previous generation's struggle, the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement. And it is also a kind of commentary and urging to build on the momentum of that struggle for the next iteration. In other words, don't go backward in terms of trying to relive a decade or 2 decades, and don't go forward into a fantasy future. Build the paradise you want to live in. That's what he has said in terms of, what does this song mean? You know, Pastime Paradise. He said, no, you can't go back. It's not nostalgia. Leave that to the United States of America. See, this white country loves nostalgia. As Gil Scott-Heron said around the same time in a song he recorded called B Movie. He said this country wants to go backward, even if it's only as far as last week. And when they couldn't get John Wayne because he was dead, they went and got the next thing, Ronald the Ray Gun. So that's why he recorded B Movie in 1982, you know. And as he said in the hook to that song, he said, you don't have to be in any hurry. You don't ever really have to worry. You don't need to check on how you feel. Just keep repeating that none of this is real. And if you get the feeling that something's wrong, well, just remember that it won't be too long before the director cuts the scene. Yeah, this ain't really your life. This ain't really your life. Ain't really your life. Ain't really nothing but a movie. This ain't really your life. Gil goes in this song through an entire critique of the Reagan years, an entire critique of what happens in the post-1960s years when the oil prices skyrocket because, as he said, the Arabs have bought the third world and put a firm down payment on the first world. And he goes on to say that the shifting of power in the world has decentered the United States. At least it's in the process of decentering. This is in the late 1970s, early 1980s. He goes through the decade of the 70s. And in another song, he opens the commentary, Gil Scott-Heron, by saying, when people ask me about the 60s, I say, well, the 60s are over. And I want to talk about what's going on now, even as you build on the momentum of the 60s, because we know Gil Scott-Heron comes to our attention when he writes as a 21-year-old, the revolution will not be televised. But anyway, I went through all that to say that Gil understands and commented and made an analysis out of his cultural meaning making and his way of knowing, coming out of our governance formations and cultural meaning making and ways of knowing, that the social structure we find ourselves in is anchored in looking backward to an imaginary past. Remember, it is Ronald Wilson Reagan who coins the term "Make America Great Again," not Donald John Trump. And Trump, engaged in the social structures form of movement and memory, picks that up and finds that resonant chord in white nationalism and white nativism. That having been said, Gil recognizes that Stevie in 1976, Songs of the Key of Life, Pastime Paradise, acknowledges that social structure, but doesn't allow that social structure to overwhelm the momentum of the cultural grounding that he received in the 50s, carried through the 60s, like Marvin Gaye made that pivot in the late 60s, early 70s, into the analysis of the social structure and envisioning a world to come. And Pastime Paradise was not one of the most popular songs on Songs of the Key of Life, because it isn't the joy, it isn't the love. And so, white people who listen to Stevie Wonder 2 and other people like, black people know exactly what he was talking about. So when Coolio and LV are there at the Billboard Awards and they're singing Gangsta's Paradise, and people, oh yeah, by then gangster rap and everything is there, and Coolio got the grimy thing going on, West Coast, West Side, want to put some hood stuff in there. They love it. It's a soundtrack for another one of them white savior movies, and so, which was a tanking. Then the song comes in. People like to cook. It's a minor key, and so LV is singing, why are we so blind to see? Who is the we? Well, the we gets to be a multicultural we in that moment, knowing that there is no we, that the ones we heard are you and me. And then, without being seen, if you listening, you know that voice when you hear that voice. And it's like, after LV sings that hook, you hear dissipation of race relations. Oh, and then the camera goes to the back of the stage past the choir, and you see one of them young boys in the choir robe. And who is he leading in? Consolation, segregation, dispensation, isolation. Stevie Wonder comes in and everybody starts cheering because he is narrating the social structure that they were resisting in the 60s and 70s. Isolation, exploitation, mutilation, mutation, miscreation, confirmation to the evils of the world. LV comes back in and watch what he does. This is governance. They're singing a duet. LV comes in and he says, been spending most our lives living in a pastime paradise. LV sings the Stevie Wonder word. And then Stevie comes back. Been spending most our lives living in a gangster's paradise. Wait, what just happened? Wait, what just happened? Y'all enjoying the music. Watch that. The young boy put Pastime Paradise. Guess who introduced it? Not Kenny G with that little punk horn. As James Brown said in what was it, Blues and Pants, when they had the long version, and he says, come in, I need a horn. And then one of the little horns comes in. He says, Fred, play a black horn. And then you hear the tenor sax come in. Dun, 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 dun. He's like, yeah, I don't want that little horn. Kenny G tried to put his little horn in there, but Luther had already set it up. This song is based on the 1976 Stevie Wonder song, Pastime Paradise. It wasn't just a duet, it was governance, because the generations locked in with each other. And then after LV did that a couple of times and Stevie did that a couple of times, what's the duet they sing together? They sing together. There are no gangsters in paradise. There are no races in paradise. There are no gangsters. Ain't no gangsters in paradise. And y'all gonna get rid of this white nationalism too. Ain't gonna be no races in paradise either. What a brilliant display. So when Coolio made transition, I played for my introduction to African American Studies class the video, that long video from 1995, that version. And of course, most of them had never seen it. Most of them were fascinated by the fact that there were a billion views. But after hearing that, and then us sitting there, we did the same thing we did this morning. Just reactions. This is a bunch of 18, 19, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, for the most part. 240 students in that class. And as you say, that electric shock goes through. But when Stevie Wonder came, it became something completely different. And I asked them, did y'all pick up on what was happening there? And of course, many of them did. Yeah. LV sang Pastime Paradise. Stevie Wonder said Gangsta's Paradise, the mutual respect. And then together, they made the real point. Gangsters in Paradise, races in Paradise. Michelle Pfeiffer, sis, go back to Scarface with the Italian cat playing the Cuban. And you go back over there and get abused by your husband and then by your lover who becomes the cat that ends up, putting you in harm's way. We got this over here in our governance structure. You don't even know who Artist Ivy Jr. is. You don't know who Larry Sanders is. You know Coolio and LV because that's what you do to get the money. But to understand what that was, you have to go behind a curtain that you're not allowed. We let you see what you want to see, Disney. You license the song, Stevie Wonder's like, no problem, 95%. In other words, y'all don't make and no cursing. And I ain't even mad at y'all, young boys. I'll come and do a duet. And I'm going to do a duet, and we're going to make the point that's underneath this point. Because who we are to each other is very different. It's very different than who we are to these other people. And people think, well, doggone. Now all that I say in the context of this week, because, our weeks, as you say, Prof, are packed, like all humans. And people are fighting, I say people, the managers who profit in this world are fighting desperately to pull us back into these labor camps. And we're not going, being human beings. So when we talk about the renewed normal in Nubia, we are renewing a normal. As people are talking about a new normal, they don't want a new normal. They want a renewed normal from yesterday, even if it's only as far back as 2020, February. But we're not talking about that. We're not going for nostalgia. We're not going back to a world that doesn't exist anymore. And let me pause here before I go on to mention my friend and brother, Kwame Alexander. You asked him a question that I'm sure he's been asked before. And I know Kwame Alexander a long time. All them guys was in school together.
Hand to God, he just texted me. So while you were talking, I dropped my number. Again, we don't know each other. So I'm like, I gave him my number. I'm never going to bother anybody. So if you're compelled, I felt like we were vibing. I told him it was a conversation I didn't know I needed. I would have waited for him forever. I left there feeling so full. I dropped my number. While you were talking, he texted me. And I promise you, I'm looking. He said, Greg is OG. Knew him since he was an undergrad at TSU. Look at this.
Oh, man.
We are tied, sis. So yeah. So I'm like, I feel like I said to him, like, we're in this spiritual vortex. We're in this. There's the ancestors. There's a spiritual drum beat going. Like we can't see, but if you can hear it and you don't listen, if you can hear it and you ignore it, woe to you, because there's a calling and a culling. There's something going on.
Come on now, teach. Ooh.
And you can chase them dollars and chase them algorithms, and you can chase what your masters put in front of you, or you can sit in your purpose and do the thing that you were put here to do. That now there are too many of us lined up to do together. You can go be individualistic, you can go ahead and be selfish, or you come together, but you do that individual thing at your own peril, because no longer will there be, and there's too many of us that no. There's not space for you to do that thing and still profit. And I'm looking at Pharrell starting a whole thing where he's selling his stuff, and I was like, that's interesting. I'm looking at it. I'm like, there's a lot of interesting things happening. As I mentioned,
Pharrell, the new black. No, it's a little different.
Yeah.
See, that's what I'm saying. I was very critical of that New Black Commentary, but we're human. We make our moves. And you're right. The more this thing resets to what we know to be true, the more people are free to be themselves. And the more we're free to be ourselves, the more we see our beauty. That's very encouraging. So he's got another thing he's doing.
He's selling stuff. Much the way we did drops here. And drops are not, Telfar. But we're controlling our own.
Yes.
Thing. I'm thinking, like diamonds. Diamonds made up marketing tool by De Beers. And I won't get too into it, but they're not the most precious of all stones. But many people have died, and so many people have been harmed for this marketing tool for something that's not very rare at all.
That's right.
And then we bought into it with the engagement thing and all of the bridal and all. It's like, are we so simple? Yes, we are. Yes. But it just is. It's that simple. It should be that simple to reverse engineer it, which is to
no question.
Make the thing that is actually valuable. And once we stop allowing ourselves to be the center of somebody else's commerce and success, and we center ourselves, it becomes really easy, and it's so clear. The path is so clear for me. I just see it. And it's a layup. I told Kwame, I said, this is a layup.
This is a layup.
Right at the rim. What are we doing?
This is a layup. Oh, wow. Okay. As you were talking, I was thinking, because I hadn't had a chance to look at the paper yet. I used to do this in class with my students. I would come in the morning, and when we talk about the rape of Africa in the 19th century, Cecil Rhodes and De Beers and Anglo-American Corporation, I would have the papers with me, the morning papers, and I would show them the New York Times, and I would say, I'm not going to do it here. I'm just going to tell you what I would do, because I opened it and confirmed. I would say, I want y'all to stop me. And I walk up and down the aisle. Say, y'all stop me when you see the first jewelry ad. Open it up. I'm never going to pass 2 pages.
Wait, there's one right there. There's one right there.
Yeah, how about that? On the front joint.
No, open the page. First page. Open it. Open the page.
Oh yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Bam.
Right there. Right.
Yeah.
I said I ain't gonna do it, and it bled on over into my hand. No question. It is right there. Exactly. We ain't gonna get no free advertising. But to your point, I mean, and we all know, of course, we know this because it's true. Every kiss begins with K. So I mean, but if you think you can somehow outswag us in terms of ads, I mean, come on now. You got cats who are just saying things because they know it rhymes and they know black people consume that stuff. And then these companies sat back like, we getting free advertising until they get smart to it. So when Run DMC say my Adidas, roam through closet floors and roam all over Coliseum floors, and Adidas is like, huh? Oh, wow. When I went on stage at Live Aid, all the people prayed and the poor got paid. Actually, that's not quite true, Rem Sims, but it's cool. I mean, because Adidas is like, no problem. And then the next easy step a couple of years later is busting them past the Cavassier. Cavassier is like, yes. And then, of course, Jay is like, Filthmore Prada jeans, Gucci bra, Filthmore jeans, take that off. Okay, right. Give it to me. Give us that. Yeah. And the companies are like, yeah, give it to me. Louis Vuitton, Don. Okay, here we go. By then they're getting paid, of course, but not anything close to what the company's getting paid. But like you said, taking our power back. So Pharrell is doing that beautiful. Keke Palmer's doing that beautiful. My brother Kwame, my goodness, Prof, you bring back you bring back. So I remember one time we were in Newark. Oh my God, and I knew his father, the great E. Curtis Alexander, as you say, a publisher, ECA and Associates, ECA Publishing. Curtis Alexander, for a long time, was one of the very few, and for many books, the only person who republished books that were impossible to find. So I'll be talking to John Henry Clark, and John Henry Clark be giving a public lecture. And when he and I would talk, I would ask him very specific questions because, as you say, you don't bother nobody, I don't bother nobody. And this is a protocol for me, particularly with elders. You don't waste elders' time. So, you come to an elder and you say to an elder, so, what do you think you're so popular? Okay, nah. So you're a journalist, man. At that point, no. When I would ask John Henry Clark, questions, it was based on me reading something he wrote or hearing something he said. And then when I would be able to sit with him, or I call him or we talk, I would ask him very specific questions. And that, of course, would open up a different kind of conversation. Well, more than a few times, our conversations anchored around someone he didn't know, but one of his very close friends and senior associates knew, John Glover Jackson out of South Carolina. And by the way, I was on with the Kemetic Institute of Health and Human Development in South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina. Dr. Bill Gunn, who has taught at the HBCUs down there for years, Benedict College in Columbia, the great Richard Allen University, which we talked about in the context of Dave Chappelle quite some time ago, whose grandfather was one of the people affiliated with the founding of Allen, and so many other things. But at any rate, my man Bernie Gallman, who is an avid, he is a Karen Hunter stan, as the young people would say, devotee. In fact, where I was last night, which I'll talk about in a minute, I was walking into the event, crossing the street, and this brother rolls down his window and says, "Dr. Carr." I look around. "Hey, what's going on, brother?" He said, "I'm listening to Karen right now." I mean, when I tell you, you can't make this up. I mean, so, the global majority is real, y'all. Some of y'all may not know, but if you know, as the kids would say, IKNYN. But at any rate, so I was with them virtually, of course. And of course, the hurricane has hit, Florida. I saw the campus of Bethune-Cookman. Looks like it tore up some buildings there. It hit Columbia and South Carolina yesterday. It's passed through and is still, now downgraded, but still dangerous. But at any rate, thinking about Curtis Alexander and ECA Associates, it reminds me of John Clark and I talking about Hubert Henry Harrison. And this would be familiar to anybody who was there on, I guess that was Thursday night. I lose track of the days, which is almost a beautiful thing. If you're working, the ancient Egyptians in Book of Tau-Tep, they would say, love of what you do, love of your work strips you of a sense of time and space. So it isn't that you're losing track of days because you're disoriented. You're losing track of the abstract concept because you are so engaged in the human and the social in the work. That gives our lives meaning, much of our lives meaning. But at any rate, we would talk about Hubert Harrison. John Clark used to swear by Hubert Harrison because John Jackson, his friend, who was from South Carolina, who he met in New York after he moved to New York in 1933. By the time John Henry Clark moved to New York in 1933, he was 15 years old. I'm sorry. He was born in 1915, so he was 18 years old, I guess that would be. And he didn't meet this brother, Hubert Henry Harrison, who was from the Caribbean, from the Danish West Indies, so to speak, St. Croix. Hubert Harrison gave Marcus Garvey his first public speaking engagement when Garvey came to New York. It's in Roy Anderson's excellent film, African Redemption. He talks about Hubert Harrison a little bit. And if you want to read about Hubert Harrison, of course, you can get Jeffrey Babcock Perry's 2 volumes, both telephone book size, on Hubert Harrison. I'm not going to get up and look at because we've talked about Harrison before, and this isn't what this is about. We've done a who you should know about Hubert Harrison over in the narrative side. So if y'all want to know more about that, you should read those books. So come on over and get that bibliography from us, because we are truly establishing collectively, everybody's contributing, this massive archive, living archive, not just documents, but most importantly, human conversations around the things we're reading and discussing. But at any rate, so Dr. Clark never knew Hubert Harrison, but John Jackson knew him. And John Jackson introduced John Henry Clark to the work of Hubert Harrison. In many ways, we're still living with that echo, because the study group that they had, here we are in study group, the largest study group, the largest Africana studies class. It's so funny, after I got off, we got off our conversation, our regular Saturday conversation on last Saturday when I was in Atlanta. I logged into the board meeting for the National Council of Black Studies, and they talked. One of the things that came up was, in the context of the academic field and discipline of Africana studies, how do we expand our ability to connect with folks who are not at the university? And one of the first things one of the board members said was, we have to figure out a way, Dr. Carr, to loop in that largest Africana studies class in the world. These are all academics. And I laughed and I said, yeah, well, we doing what we do. So, we'll figure out ways to do that. I said to myself, I'm writing down, I'm taking my notes, and we will. But at any rate, this study group we're in, this, I don't want to say group, this study formations, especially office hours, and every Monday night, office hours is just mind blowing. Man, last Monday, you know, I don't know about you, Prof, but I've gotten so many comments and heard people talking about directly with me in exchanges about the compelling power of, you know, when Daryl came on in particular, but not just Daryl. I mean, the whole conversation around reparations and what's going on in California, we have a global reach. So, let me not get too far afield because Kwame is at the center of the story I'm about to tell. So, John Jackson out of South Carolina nominated John Henry Clark for membership in the small study group they had in Harlem in the 1930s. It was called the Old Harlem History Club, as Dr. Clark used to call it. The old, because by then almost everybody had made transition. Willis N. Huggins, sometimes William Hansberry would come up from D.C. He was on the faculty at Howard. The uncle of Lorraine Hansberry, but most importantly, a pioneer in the study of classical Africa, Nubia, Egypt, or Kemet, as Dr. Beatty will remind us. And so they had this meeting. This regular meeting was in the basement of the Harlem YMCA. And John Jackson brought John Henry Clark there. And that was where John Henry Clark was introduced to many of these readers and writers, many of these scholars, and began to do his own work. And one of the people he was introduced to was a man who had made transition in 1927, Hubert Henry Harrison. So he was, John Clark was a Hubert Henry Harrison stan, as was John G. Jackson. John G. Jackson, of course, who published a small pamphlet on Hubert Harrison called Hubert Henry Harrison, the Black Socrates. I'll resist the urge to go into Harrison again. Go over the narrative. You'll see the long conversation we had about Hubert Harrison, who, along with August Wilson and Coretta Scott King, share a birthday. We talked about that context as well. So what does this got to do with Kwame Alexander? Well, his father, Curtis Alexander, made it his business, because Curtis Alexander was a comrade of, in some ways contemporary of, junior contemporary. He was younger than John Clark, John Jackson, and all them, Yosef Ben-Yakin and Dr. Ben and all them, Edward Scobie and all them. But Baba Curtis made it his business to find these books that John Clark and others would constantly tell us to read, because then you go to the bookstore, they're out of print. Damn, it's out of print. You go to the library, Nomo X out of Columbus, Ohio, the great Nomo X, who always reminded us, watching civil rights documentaries where they sicking dogs and fire hoses on black people, in the words of Nomo X, always kill that dog. Always cut that hose. You know, when he said, that dog had bitten me, I always kill that dog. I never forget, my man Nomo X. The Afro set, that's a whole nother thing. We had to talk about that another day. But my man Baba Kwesi Ohene out of Detroit, these are the Negroes that would go into the public libraries and engage in what they call liberation work. I'm not checking this book out the library. It shouldn't be in the first place. So sometimes they would toss the books out the windows to a waiting co-conspirator. Sometimes they would just walk out, because it's before metal detectors. And then they would make copies of whatever books they had liberated from the library. And then they made the People's Library. Well, E. Curtis Alexander, when he would get a copy of Hubert Harrison's When Africa Awakes, or Hubert Harrison's collection of columns, The Negro and the Nation, E. Curtis Alexander would make copies and then print and bind the book, because most of these books were way past copyright, meaning nobody, was checking for profit, and he would make those books available to the community. The first time I met Kwame's father was at a book fair in Columbus, Ohio, that was put on regularly by our brother Akbar Muhammad. Some of y'all know Akbar, a senior lieutenant in the Nation of Islam, lived for a time in West Africa, a book man, Baba Akbar. Akbar would put on, and the proprietor of a book sales formation called Akbar's Books and Things. And I was a graduate student in Ohio State at the time. And we lived for Akbar's book fair. He would bring to St. Louis, is where his base operations was, but he would bring the book fair to Columbus, one of the stops. And at Akbar's Books and Things book fair, you could get books you couldn't find anywhere else. This is long before a few keystrokes and you might be able to track something down. And then, of course, once you have the internet, increasingly now people try to price match, and they don't know nothing about the books. So don't be looking on Amazon for a lot of books. People say, Dr. Carr, you mentioned the book, and I went looking for it on Amazon. It was $1,000. That's because the algorithm doesn't recognize where to get it. Baba Nati got that book in Everyone's Place up in Baltimore. Holly and them got it. Jonathan got a few copies at Sankofa. And if you look at our book list in narrative, our bookstore list, you got to go to SO1 for that, or you got to go to Marcus Books for that, or you got to go, you can find, but Amazon don't know nothing about it. You understand? They just see these things as widgets. Well, Curtis Alexander, I'll never forget, Akbar Books and Things, book fair. They setting up, everybody. They haven't opened the book fair. This is a Saturday morning. I think the book fair opened at like 9. The featured speaker, and you appreciate this, Prof. Hunter, one of your comrades in the sainted work, in the divine work of broadcast, because nothing will ever displace radio, because you got to make up the images in your mind, and the word is going right in your ear. That's why some of y'all are listening to this as podcasts. It's very important. But your comrade in that work, the great Bob Law. Bob Law was the featured speaker that day at the book fair. So I'm coming to hear Bob Law because I had spent the summer of 1989 in New York, and I would be dragging my behind into the NAACP Legal Defense Fund for work when I was clerking there. I would be half asleep in the morning when I get on the train in Jersey City and come down to Lower Manhattan and get off World Trade Center and go up to 99 Hudson Street, because I stayed up all night listening to Bob Law. Because remember, Bob Law's radio show was like 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and you couldn't, I couldn't get off night talk, man. And so, of course, consciousness is the way that we must think. So Baba John Henrik Clarke reminds us, I'm in heaven. I'm laying in this bed in Jersey City, listening to Bob Law, writing down notes for books. I'm on a intern salary, which ain't no money at all. The only reason I can stay that close to New York is because I'm living in a room that was rented to me for dirt cheap by the parents of one of my colleagues at the law school, who was like, oh, my mom and them live in Jersey. They got a room. And I said, well, how much y'all want? He said, oh, no, we all want something. So no, I'm from Tennessee. There's a protocol, governance. I got to get y'all something. But everything else, I was buying books, books all summer. So at any rate, listening to Bob Law. So Bob Law's coming. I ain't never seen Bob Law in person. Never seen the big man. They still got Like It Is on television in New York when I was watching The Great Gil Noble and all that. So these are, this is the generation before you and me, Prof. But these are the people who you inherited that baton from. It's very serious when you listen to them on the radio. When people listen to you. Man stopped me in the street last night. I'm listening to Karen right now. In other words, these are the people who build community. You convene community. So anyway, I'm in. I come into the room in Columbus, this big auditorium. I forget what is the Armory somewhere downtown Columbus. Akbar's book fair, and I'm like, yeah, here we go. So I'm there at like 8 o'clock. The thing started at 9. Why? I done made my calculation. The rent money, I didn't touch. But everything else, I converted to dollars. And tapped a couple of my friends and students. Yeah, loan me the money. Why? Because I'm spending everything but the rent money. Light bill, don't worry about that. I can miss a month. I figure I'll catch it up. But I'm spending everything because it's the one shot to get things. And who am I coming there for? I want to see Akbar. I want to hear Bob Law and see him in person and shake his hand. But the man I am coming for is E. Curtis Alexander, ECA Publishers. Why? Because Curtis got the stuff you can't get from anywhere else. He got them books John Henrik Clarke be talking about. And I got a list. I want Albert Churchward. I want Gerald Massey. I want all of Hubert Henry Harrison. And he got stuff I don't even know I want yet. I got to get there and get it. Now, mind you, this is around the same time that Paul Coates at Black Classic Press begins many of these books he republishes with John Henrik Clarke's direction. Some of these same books, Floreshaw Lugard, A Tropical Dependency. You name it, a number of different books. I could start talking about them. Hubert Henry Harrison's book, When Africa Awakes. Now Black Classic Press is going to take the baton and run alongside E. Curtis Alexander. But this is before Paul starts republishing some of these books. All right. And of course, Paul Coates is a legend even then. But Paul Coates in Baltimore. I'm in Columbus, Ohio. Akbar bringing the bookstore. And word on the street is E. Curtis Alexander going to be here. So I'm there at 8 o'clock. I'm looking in, it's locked. But every time they open the door for a vendor to come in, I'm like, I should just go in there. And then, it's an auditorium, right? So you got the tables, vendors do. It's like a rectangle. All the tables are surrounded, and then the stage is up front. That's what Bob and them are going to be. And in the middle of the floor of the auditorium, like almost like an island. There are no seats or anything, like an island, are some folding tables, those long folded tables, not yet built. So you have them pull the legs out and put them in a, but they're laying. I'm like, what are those? And who then, as I'm looking and seeing people go in, the door opens, I look back. Here comes this tall dude pulling this big cart with all these boxes. I know his face because I got a couple of his books from Unimulzak at Liberation back in 89. This is like 1991, maybe 1991. That's E. Curtis Alexander. He's bringing the books. He's coming in. So I hold the door for Curtis Alexander, moves through. All right. Now, Kwame's a little boy. Kwame's just a little younger than me. That's why he called me the OG. So he Curtis Alexander by himself. Alexander, I said, can I help you? He said, yeah, hold that door for me. So he moves in with this huge cart with all these boxes. So I just walk with him. Now I done deputized myself. He goes straight to the middle of the floor. And I said, do you need help? He said, would you mind helping me? I said, not at all. I said, do you have Hubert Henry Harrison when Afro waits? He said, of course I do, brother. I said, what? I said, do you have the Negro in the Nation? He said, yes, I do. I said, wait, do you have Signs and Symbols of Primordial Man, Albert Churchward? I have them all. Do you have Godfrey Higgins, Anacalypsis? I have them all. And then he holds his hands like this, and Price is better than the white man. I said, I'm in heaven. I'm about to be broke. I need to go get the rent money. I might have to get rent money. And then this is what he says to me. He says, if you help me build this island and put these tables up and help me sell, I will give you a deep discount on everything. I almost cried. Kwame Alexander is my man. His daddy made sure I had all those books, John Clark and John Jackson and Amos Wilson, and all the people was talking about. I had those books from Curtis Alexander. Now, Kwame, let me end with this. This is when, this is one of the early times me and Kwame interacted. Fast forward to Newark, St. Rocco's High School in Newark. We had the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations, our ASCAC conference in 1992. Supposed to be at City College, but this is the time when the lynch mob was out for Leonard Jeffries. And the great stalwarts of education in New York could not intervene. They were trying to fire Leonard Jeffries at City College. Around that same time, and maybe a little later, you see, Adelaide Sanford, who is trying to fight for us at the level of the New York State Board of Regents. They get after her around this curriculum of inclusion. This is the curriculum wars. If y'all want to read about it. In fact, I talked about it last week in Atlanta. I pulled up one of my copies of Arthur Schlesinger's book, The Disuniting of America. All this CRT business, no, this ain't, this ain't new. If you go back to the early 90s, the attack was on all the African-centered scholars, Asa Hilliard, John Henry Clark, Maulana Karenga, you name it, Leonard Jeffries, Molefi Asante, James Turner, you name Marimba Ani, then, known as Donna Marimba Richards in some circles, Vivian Gordon. I'm naming some of the sisters that all the folks who talk about feminism and womanism, it's always interesting to me how they talk about all these women and they never mention Vivian Gordon. They never mention Marimba Ani. They never mention Sharcy McIntyre. And that tells me either one of two things. Either one, you don't know, and I know you know because some of y'all are my friends. Number two, you can't reconcile these Pan-African internationalists with this narrow thing that you're trying to pull off for profit. And I understand. No problem. I understand. We all got to negotiate and navigate. Anyway, so we're in Jersey because the African-centered attack is heavy. And you know this, of course, Prof, because that's your neck of the woods. Newark don't play that. City College won't let Leonard Jeffries, St. Rocco's like, bet, come on, let them come over here. And so we have the conference on a turn of a dime in March 92 at St. Rocco's. Curtis Alexander is set up. My God. Hey, y'all, we weren't even supposed to talk about it this morning, but the ancestors had a different plan. That's what so we are in, all the vendors are in the basement of St. Rocco's. The conference is being held in all the classrooms at St. Rocco's, and the plenaries are being held. The big gatherings in between the workshops are being held in the auditorium. Well, it's overflow. Because, you know, this is the African Centered Conference and everybody is there. And we're on the East Coast and we're in the New York, New Jersey area, which means all the folks who are at First World, you know, Mama Keffa and them, Baba Bill, everybody's coming over. So everybody you can think of who are in the bookstores all over the country and the world are, many of them live on the East Coast. And then everybody else is coming in anyway. So we're all there. The opening plenary was John Henrik Clarke, Yosef Ben Jochannan, Jacob Carruthers. Oh man, I can't name everybody, but it was kind of, you know. And then Zingaradabisha Heru, who was the president of ASCAT, Dr. Ben had brought this large papyrus back, this wall-sized papyrus back from Kemet that he presented to her. It was a beautiful thing. We all sitting there, and we young people, so we just like, wow, I can't believe we here. So after the session comes up, and I should preface this by saying E. Curtis Alexander printed a number of books that were out of print, and out of print for a long time, so he wasn't violating no copyright. Then he had another category of books he printed that were original works. Some of his stuff, some things like, it would be like what we are mapping out now in this formation. We're in narrative and Nubia because, I mean, we got so much stuff now. We are, 135 and counting. And so all of these sessions transcribed, edited, moved around. We got plans, right? We know that. Not just films, not just other productions, but books. We know that. And we got everything lined up. We do what we do, right? So at any rate, Curtis Alexander would sometimes publish either transcripts or nuggets from speeches, from lectures, from presentations. So he had a book called Axioms and Quotations of Yosef Ben Jochannan. And on the back of the book was Dr. Ben and Baba Curtis together, because they know each other well. They've traveled, you know, and he said and smiling on the back. And then the book was full of like sayings of Dr. Ben, quotations from Dr. Ben, pieces of book lists from Dr. Ben, you know, observations of Dr. Ben. Small book, probably not even 100 pages. And it'd be impossible for me to find a copy of that around here now. Probably all my copies probably in storage. I do not have a signed copy of Yosef Ben Jochannan's Axioms and Quotations of Yosef Ben Jochannan. I'm going to tell you why. After that plenary that morning, somebody went up there with a copy of that book that E. Curtis Alexander was selling on the bottom floor, Axioms and Quotations, and presented it to Dr. Ben to sign. Ben looked at the book. Ben said, "Where you get this book?" "I just bought it from Curtis Alexander downstairs." "What? He didn't give me no money for this book." Now, you're a publisher, Professor Honey, so you know where I'm going with this, right? I look down. We looking at this now. We standing in front of the stage. John Henrik Clarke, Yosef Ben Jochannan sitting next to each other. Dr. Ben turns to Dr. Clarke, his friend, and said, "John, look at this." John Henrik Clarke is blind. Ben is so outraged. He shoves this book under the nose of his friend and said, "John, look at this." John Henrik Clarke can't see that book. he said, "What? Curtis published this book? I didn't get no money." Now, you got to know Dr. Ben. There's huge backstories to all this. So I'm going to shorten this very because we got to get to Kwame. So he showed the book. Of course, he can't see the book. He said, "Where is he?" Somebody, and it's people could co-sign. There's a lot of people who we know. I don't know, was Mario there? I don't think Mario was there. Tony Browder was there, though. Naeem Akbar. There was a lot of, right? And so, and somewhere, I do believe there is a recording of this. Why? Because this is the period when everybody run around with tape recorders so they could record the lectures, man. And I saw at least a couple of hands with tape recorders. I ain't gonna name no names, but anyway. So Ben gets up. Ben gets up, comes down, you know, in high school auditoriums, comes down off that wooden stage, down them steps, and takes off going toward the back of the auditorium to go downstairs to confront E. Curtis Alexander for selling Axioms and Quotations of Yosef Ben Jochannan, and he ain't seen no money. This was a big thing, by the way, in the 90s, because, you know, people would make recordings of lectures and stuff, and then they would sell the tapes, and then people who gave the lecture would be like, "What?" But most people let it pass because though that money was keeping in circulation a lot of black vendors. You know, that's what we do. Like I said, Barack Obama, I give Barack Obama incredible credit, full credit. This may have been the most important thing that Barack Obama did. When Barack Obama got elected, there were so many Negroes selling T-shirts and coffee mugs that he probably kept people's lights on. I don't know about policy, but I do know about that. But at any rate, so Ben gets downstairs and we are in tow like smoke off a fire, like little boys going ready to see a schoolyard fight behind an old man now. Meanwhile, there's people in the front saying, Dr. Ben, calm down, you gonna have a stroke. No, I want to see. So he gets downstairs. Curtis happens to not be at the table. So like I helped Curtis Alexander sell books at Akbar Books and Things when in Columbus when he had the book fair there. Who, Professor Hunter, do you think is manning the table for ECA and Associates publishers at that time?
Little Kwame.
Kwame is standing there at the table when Yosef Ben Yakin and a trail of people who are all too hyped to see a confrontation come busting in the vendors. Yosef Ben Yakin into my brother, Kwame Alexander. Where's your daddy? Kwame looking like, what? Wait, where's your daddy? Huh? And Dr. Ben, Dr. Ben already he from Puerto Rico. And he has that beautiful lilting voice of the lyrical voice of the Caribbean. And he talking fast. And his teeth might come out. So, man, I saw him in London and I had a box of books. And I'm telling you right now, if you don't say nothing to me, I need to, you don't understand. I want to know. Kwame doesn't know nothing about it. And Curtis happened to not be at the table. So, in that moment, we calming Dr. Ben down. Kwame, my brother, never loses his cool. Well, I would tell him. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Deep, there's that same spirit that you encountered with him when you was talking to him. That's him. He's been like that since he was a kid. And in that moment, I felt so sorry for him because, again, this is something. And eventually, of course, it got worked out because Ben would use it. He might go completely over the top off something that he really shouldn't, but nobody know. And then later, what happened? Well, I talked to Curtis and it was just, but dude, you didn't say that in front of everybody because at that point he had moved into performance, I think a little bit, right? It wasn't going to be no fight, although Ben did look like he'd probably fight somebody. Who he going to fight, right? But over the years, Kwame Alexander, who is now in the social structure, as you know, as you opened up with, huge book awards, all the stuff. He was down at the Kennedy Center doing stuff, particularly YA. So crossover, rebound. I mean, I recommend Kwame Alexander's books. He's a poet by training. In fact, I got a little staple volume over there he did with Jelani Cobb and them, Ta-Nehisi, all them boys when they was in college. You know what I'm saying? I don't even know if they got copies. I'm sure they do. But I mean, little staple volume. I said, look at this. But so he started as a poet, right? And then he does his YA stuff. He's major all over the globe. But as just so people know, in terms of the governance formation, that man comes out of a governance formation. And he writes about this. Is it booked? Booked might be. I don't know, Prof. Did you all talk about any of his publications?
Well, he was on to talk about The Door of No Return, which I just downloaded into my Kindle, which is, you want to talk about writing. And, chapter 1 is the Sankofa bird, is a piece of art. And he is telling the story of Black boys and girls before there was, he said, our history didn't start in 1619. I was like, Dr. Carr, I hear it.
Curtis Alexander.
Yeah, Curtis Alexander, which I didn't know. Exactly. I was like, oh, it's the same spirit. That's why I was like, this is happening in the universe because the drum beat is the same when you hear it, right? And so he's like, Black Joy was before we were snatched up. So it's like a brother. He's got a bully. He's in love with his little girl. The bully's in love with the girl. So I'm telling a story of humanity in this book, and I love YA books because most YA writers can write their asses off. Some of the best writing you will ever find. So I had to download it, and I was reading it, and it reads like poetry. He's starting off. I mean, it's just chef's kiss to him. Mm-hmm. But as I'm, so he's on to promote the book that came out this week, and I had a conversation, as I mentioned, that I didn't expect to have with somebody that I hope will become a lifelong friend because his mind,
for sure.
His mind, man, it's just ooh. He said that it starts. There was a time, ... ellipsis, many seasons ago, ... when our people were the sole supplier of the purest and most valuable gold in the world. The river was bedded with enough gold to make a century of royal stools for the Ashanti kings, 1,000 shiny bracelets for their wives. Then came the foreigners. Invaders disguised as friends, pretending to be students of our way, with only one lesson to learn: how to steal our fortunes. And it goes on and talks about the Offin River, but we're learning about Ghana and that coast and everything through the eyes and lens of young people. But he's telling his given history because it's in his blood, and there's a map of the kingdom. The Asante. I mean, it's just Kumasi. I mean, just like I'm sitting there as I'm working today on a book with the Adinkra symbols.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Shout out to Nana Yao and Michelle Yabo. I'm working on this book because we're about to do a drop for Kwanzaa. And
Yes.
so these symbols, and I'm getting it right because I'm going to our team that's in Ghana. Is this right? Is this definition right? Because I don't want to be a colonizer. I'm not from there. I want to make sure it is right.
It is right.
400 years from now. We got to get it right now. So
that's right.
Yeah, this is beautiful.
That's right. And that's so powerful. I mean, and it's funny. First of all, yes, and thank you for affirming what I suspected and what many of us suspected, which are YA writers are just the best YA writers. Just, I mean, because it's clear. Yeah, I mean, I tell people all the time. I mean, if you read children's books and YA books, you can get a quicker. It's almost like mainlining the memory, especially in a society where we don't read the dense academic tomes the same way. And many people never pick up a book. They will pick up that book, and if you do, then when you finally work your way into Born in Blackness, you recognize everything. Kwame will give you a map. No question. No question.
I mean, half my library is YA. I make no. I'm not even embarrassed to say that.
No.
Half my novel reading YA. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking. And so fun. It's so funny. He narrates an autobiographical. He gives us an autobiography of sorts in a fictional form. In a previous book he wrote called Booked, Booked. In Booked, he tells the story of his relationship with his father, but it ain't him. You know what I'm saying? He uses the character. In other words, here's a kid who's into sports. I don't want to say it was soccer. He was a soccer or
soccer.
Was soccer, yeah, because I think Rebound was the basketball player. But his
dad, and then crossover.
The crossover, right there. Is it the three? I forget. It's a trilogy.
Crossover, Rebound. I think it's a trilogy.
Okay. I keep a copy of Booked because and see, that's the other thing, people ask all the time. Like you asked me last week, or week before last, you like, when you close your eyes, are you seeing that book? Absolutely. Because that's one reason why I like to go around. I like to go different places when I'm reading certain things. If I want to remember something, if I'm reading a book, like I just got this copy, Brian Jones, who is there in the New York area. He's director of New York Public Library Center for Educators in School. He sent me this. He reached out to me and said, I need to talk to him. I hope you should talk to him too. It's called The Tuskegee Student Uprising, a history. Because a lot of people talk about the Black University concept. They think of Howard University. They may think of the Atlanta University Center, Abdullah Kalamat. But at Tuskegee, they had this Black university fight in the 60s. And, I love Tuskegee. I mean, my mom was from there, 45 minutes from Tuskegee. And I've always had that kind of feeling for Tuskegee. And so what Brother Jones is doing is telling the story of how Black power looked in the South. And in fact, we're going to come back to that in a minute. Or let me just put this marker down before we go forward. The 4th of October is Rap Brown's birthday. Hubert Rap Brown out of Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, who has been in lockdown the last 20 years as a political prisoner for a murder he didn't commit. But you know how the United States of America does. They put your ass in jail, unless you're Matt Gaetz or Donald Trump. Shout out to that stooge on the court, the federal bench in Florida, who just continues to try to keep her master out of jail. But anyway, so when I and I'll probably stick this in the bag. It's a little rainy around here today. At some point today, when I can, I'm going to slip somewhere where I can read maybe 100 pages. Maybe I could get away with sitting there till I finish the book. But the point is, when I go to a certain place, when I'm thinking about that book, when I want to remember something from the book, I put myself back in where I was when I was reading it. When I read Booked, I was sitting at a coffee shop on Capitol Hill, store, Pret a Manger, which is really a British chain. Oz and them know. And by the way, shout out to Adesoje and Ndoku and Aya. I saw all of them last night. I'll tell y'all about that in a minute. In person, a lot of Nubians. And I'm like, wow, look at y'all. Oh my goodness, look at it. Anyway, my sister Denise, who was a Nubian, also my colleague at Howard University, who was there with her son. I'm like, wow, look at us. We all here. But anyway, so Osnum, all you UK Africans know Pret. Pret jumped upon, and I like Pret because the coffee is like my granddaddy coffee, you know. Or as the man said when Jack Johnson beat Jim Jeffries, and the brother walked into the restaurant and was like, I want some coffee and eggs. I want my eggs weak, yellow, and runny like Jim Jeffries, and I need that coffee hot, black, and strong like Jack Johnson. At which point they lynched him. But at any rate, the hot, black, and strong is what Pret serves. I'm sitting reading Booked, and I couldn't put it down. I'm drinking cup after cup of coffee, sitting outside at Pret a Manger across the street from the Starbucks, which I don't like their coffee. It's too bitter. Probably about 4 blocks from the Library of Congress on the other side, backside of Capitol Hill. And I can't put the book down because what it really is a love letter to his father. I love sports. My daddy was like, you're going to read a book every day. You're going to do these vocabulary words every day. And the kid is like, I hated it until I loved it. So when he's writing, what you're reading from Kwame Alexander is how he literally was trained by one of the great bookmen of the era, the great E. Curtis Alexander. And all of the people that Curtis Alexander introduced him to, who Kwame knew from a child all the way up through now. So Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Mama Sharcy, all the Wade Nobles, Jacob Carruthers, and then brings all that energy to a HBCU where he interacts with other people. I mean, Ta-Nehisi Coates is the son of Paul Coates. So he ain't coming to Howard for his blackness. He is, however, coming to meet others who are like him, and then get a faculty like Ron Walters and others, who we'll come back to in about 10 minutes, who is helping them shape that. So Kwame has been shaped by this a long time. So when you get a gift like his young adult fiction, what you're really getting is the keys to a deep immersion in governance, in ways of knowing, in cultural meaning making, and movement and memory. And so the social structure. So when you ask him, you know, what about the Black public side? What about the independent publishing side? I think now we are, and you of course have been at this for quite some time, in terms of this rhythm of how do we build our formations? And of course, Narrative Newbie is just a quantum leap into that space, at the continuing iteration of what you've been doing. At the same time that we leverage resources from social structure formations. So as Stevie Wonder, who bought, you know, was it KPLA in Los Angeles, had the radio station, which still there. I think it's where Tyler Smiley has his show now. But at any rate, Stevie Wonder, who said we're going to have our independent stuff. And if you're going to release this billion YouTube view years later and huge million selling platinum release and won all the awards, Grammy in 96, Song of the Year in 95. Yeah, I'm going to need 95% of that publishing. Oh, we see what you're doing. Kwame represents that. So I'll live with this for now with our brother. After I finished book sitting there at Pret a Manger, as I sat there, I closed that book and I sat there for a long time. I picked up my phone. I texted Kwame. I said, brother, you put your foot in this one. I could see your daddy as clear as day. I was back in that auditorium in Columbus, Ohio at Akbar's book fair. Because Curtis Alexander, I should say one other thing about Curtis, and he texted me back, oh, thank you, brother. That means a lot coming from you. I'm saying, nah, man, because you are our representative in spaces where people like me, you know, I find myself in those spaces from time to time, but I'm not a pioneer in those spaces. I don't go in those spaces. So I love it when I hear him on NPR. I love it more when I hear that he was with you on Sirius, and as you see him on Good Morning America, something, and he got his father's smile. So that kind of calm, like, you know, that's that smile and that spirit. And I'm sitting there laughing the whole time. I'm like, he's a good brother. He ain't never fake. That's who he is. But y'all have no idea that you are inviting into this space something that can transform the way we look at the world, and that many of the people who surrounded him are people who wouldn't give y'all $1, wouldn't pee on you, wouldn't throw a cup of water on you if you was on fire. But, you know, it's all love. Now, you know, Kwame got a different spirit. He gonna be wherever people are of common humanity, but he's not ever gonna shine. He ain't gonna step and fetch. He ain't gonna change it up. He's going to introduce into that space who we are. And that's the way governance formation should interact with a social structure. As you said, Prof, I'm not changing who I am. Stevie Wonder ain't changing who he is. Y'all love Stevie Wonder so much, no question. You better listen to Pastime Paradise. You better listen to Living Just Enough for the City. You better listen to Stevie Wonder. We've talked about Stevie Wonder. So the other thing about Curtis Alexander, I'll say real quickly, is Curtis Alexander he and I were in a conversation that led to me getting hired at Howard. We were at the National Council of Black Studies, ironically, in North Carolina. This would have been around 1992. It was spring of 1992, March 1992. We're in North Carolina, and we're in a room. He and I and a couple other panelists who I've forgotten who they were. You know how those panels go. You got like 4 people on a panel. You got like an hour and 10 minutes. Everybody get 10 minutes. Then you had question and answer, this kind of thing. And we're talking about books. We're talking about books. We're talking about history. I forget even the name of the thing. But we were in there, and then it went to the hour and whatever it was, hour and 10 minutes, hour and 20 minutes thing. And said, okay, now we're going to the next rotation. But nobody was scheduled right after us in that room. So we were like, well, let's sit here and talk. We got to catch up. I ain't seen you in a while, Bob. But yeah, this is what we talking about. Nobody in the room who was there for that panel wanted to leave. So, because they listen to us talk, we talking, and because we running the genealogy. This is what Anderson Thompson and Larry Crow and Conrad World and them used to do. If you get them in a room, they're gonna start running the genealogy. So they're gonna say, this person influenced this person influenced this person, this book, this event, and they matching stuff. So if you're sitting there, you're getting a working genealogy, mouth to ear. This is in no book, because it's also coming with stories they experienced, stories people who told them experienced. And so that's what we're doing. This is 2 generations having a different kind of conversation. And Curtis Alexander know all these people. So we talking, long story short, after it was over, we were in there for maybe like 90 minutes after that. And so finally, the next people say, okay, well, we got somebody here now. So okay, who comes to the front of the room, shakes my hand, gives me his card, and says, will you reach out to me? Why? We're looking for somebody at Howard University. That was Russell Lee Adams, the chair of African American Studies at Howard. He said, I was sitting in here and I couldn't leave. And then I looked around and seen people coming in here, and as word spread that y'all was in here holding court, people were leaving other workshops coming in here to listen. It was me and Curtis Alexander. It was really Curtis Alexander, because when I'm in a position like that with an elder, I'm an interlocutor. I'm asking him questions that I know he can answer. I can ask him, why was it so important that Anacalypsis as a book was something that we read now? Because clearly it's outdated. Why are we still reading Gerald Massey? And then you walk you through the history of the Harlem History Club, the Edward Blyden Society. Okay, Bob. Okay. So when you got into publishing, I mean, do you remember Afro Am? Tell us about some of these people. What about Preston Wilcox? Now, I know these names and I know some of these stories, but he knew these people. That's how you put mouth to ear history together. And so the rest is history. I emailed Dr. Adams, and he invited me down to Howard. I did an interview, and they made me an offer. Now, that offer came about a month before I got an email from the dean of College of Arts and Sciences at Tuskegee. But for that, sitting with Curtis Alexander, I probably have been Tuskegee all these years. But sitting in that panel, so I owe Kwame a lot. I don't even know if Kwame knows that story, quite frankly. But now if he's paying. So anyway, yeah, I love you, brother. That's so we're kind of just, there's so much going on right now in the week since we've seen each other. Of course, you mentioned Burkina Faso. That caught your eye, huh, Prof? What's going on in Burkina? Muted.
There are a lot of things going on in Africa, and I'm making a commitment as I round into my 8th year on SiriusXM to spend time weekly spanning the globe, educating myself about what's happening in these different places as folk contemplate, as Stevie Wonder has, moving back to the continent. I want to know what's going on, and I want to inform the audience about what's happening in these different places. I know there's something going on in Rwanda right now, in Ethiopia right now. Yes. So when I saw the coup in Burkina Faso, I was like, what is happening on this continent? What is going on? So, I dropped that link to you last night because I was like, is there a thread that we should be paying attention to as all of these things erupt throughout the continent? And then there's something going on with China. We know that. And there's there's a lot of outside interference.
Yes.
As always.
Well, as always, I mean, I think that's one of the, there are a lot of sites. I think of like Africa is a country. Is Africa as a country? Yeah. Because of course, Africa is not a country, but the idea is that these folk are putting together Of course, everything is available all the time, everywhere. At least it appears to be. So, cutting through the noise is difficult. But there are a few anchoring places. There was a magazine, and the name escapes me now. It used to be just in print. First time I went to South Africa in 2004, I went looking for it. But I drugged my students there. Stephanie Joy Tisdale, Melvin Parole. I drugged them down to Clark Street in Cape Town looking for this place, this hole in the wall where they sold the magazine, and the name escapes me. It's across street from Clark's bookstore. And I'm gonna ask myself to remember, and maybe it'll come to me before we close out in a few for today. But at any rate, they have a good website. But if you go to Africa as a country and start there, it'll and of course, beautifully, think about our brother Cedric in Brazil. What is being published now here in the formation that you're pulling together, this Pan-African network of almost string. It almost reminds me of Claude Barnett and the Associated Negro Press. We've done this before, of course. And of course, the domestic U.S. African press, the Defender, the Courier, all the great papers, the Column Post, as you talked about last week. All of those papers did international work, and they did it well. So when you read Gerald Horne's book on Claude Barnett and the rise of the Associated Negro Press, and we talked about the Associated Negro Press as well. I don't see if I had. I know I usually keep one of those Associated Press books. Oh, here is so can I pull this out? This is Lawrence Hogan's book, A Black National News Service, the Associated Negro Press, and Claude Barnett. What we understand, he started the ANP in 1919, but it wasn't just Black American news. They covered Africa, they covered Caribbean, they covered wherever Black people were. And they often traveled there, which is why when Kwame Nkrumah was brought in as Prime Minister of Ghana, the Black press was there, the Black American press. But at any rate.
And Kwame is named for Kwame Nkrumah because Kwame is born on Wednesday, not Saturday. He said his dad named him after Kwame Nkrumah.
That's what I'm talking about. That's the beauty. That's movement and memory. How do Africans remember that experience? And it actually ties beautifully to what's going on in Burkina Faso and what's going on all over Africa. There's a lot of internal critique of Kwame Nkrumah, the first Prime Minister of Ghana, and legitimate critique in terms of maybe being heavy-handed, imprisoning some of his political opponents, including his Jegna, who he ended up opposing, J.B. Danquah, and unfortunately, but that has to be balanced against the full humanity of a person who John Clark met when he moved to New York in 1933 and was introduced to the Harlem History Club, the old Edward Blyden Society, by John Jackson. One of the people living in New York around that time was a young undergraduate student who ended up doing undergraduate work at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, HBCU, named Francis Nkrumah. And John Clark met and befriended Francis Kwame Nkrumah in the 1930s, which is why when Dr. Clark moved to Ghana in the late 1950s and didn't have no money, he always tell that story about how Nkrumah was prime minister. And one day he was driving in a car, Nkrumah with his motorcade, and John Clark standing on the road like everybody else, waving at the man. And then the motorcade screeches to a halt. Nkrumah gets out and goes back and sees John Henry Clark and said, "What are you doing in my country?" And John Clark said, "Well, I came because I want to help Africa." And he ain't got no money. He said the check he was owed for a piece that he had written in one of the American papers bounced. He over here in he said the slums of Accra. Kwame Nkrumah said, "Boy, you sure must love Africa." He said, so he gave him a job on the Ghana Evening News, which was Kwame Nkrumah's newspaper. So, I mean, all those convergences, right? So, yeah, Kwame is named for Kwame Nkrumah. Of course, it makes perfect sense because that's, as far as Pan-Africanist. So, as I said, Nkrumah was overthrown in a coup d'etat that was fomented and it exacerbated existing tensions in the country, fomented by the UK, hail to the damn Queen and King, and the United States and others. They ain't like Kwame Nkrumah, because Nkrumah was saying, all you Africans, anybody from the African diaspora, y'all can come to Ghana, bring your skills, bring your talents. If you see, and maybe we should watch this. We can watch this in Nubia and Refill. We'll get our sister Shrikiana Aina, Haile Gerima's wife and filmmaker, who did her documentary Footprints of Pan-Africanism. That would be a beautiful one, because she interviewed many of that generation of Africans from the United States who went to live in Ghana, some of whom are still there. Many of whom are ancestors, but they've continued to come to Ghana. They're still in Ghana. Some of y'all may be tuning in now, or being in the Mbangi right now from Ghana, so you know this story. And you're living this story. Shrikiana made a documentary on it. In many ways, it's the documentary companion piece to Sankofa, particularly that last scene in Sankofa. If you've seen Sankofa, the film that the Gerimas made. But at any rate, you can have a coup that's going to be 4 minutes from outside, because, you know, these companies that these states are markers for, they want the gold, they want the bauxite, they want the oil, they want all this, they want the cocoa. They don't want these African countries to develop themselves in ways where they maintain control of their resources and use those resources to help their main resource, which is the human resource. They don't want that. They just want you to be able to walk in to Hershey, Pennsylvania at the gift shop and get some Hershey cocoa. You know, they don't give a damn about Cote d'Ivoire. They will say they do, but only if you make enough noise to make them embarrassed or them worried about their bottom line, their sales line. But Nkrumah and them are moving in a different direction. So you got to take these guys out. You got to take out Nkrumah. You got to take out Amilcar Cabral in Guinea-Bissau. You got to take out Patrice Lumumba in the Congo. You got to some way, how later on, get rid of Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso. After the assassination of Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso has gone through serial uprisings, many times led by young people, because these countries are in constant interference with them. And of course, we're keeping our eye on Haiti, because the people are in the streets in Haiti, and the Western press is making it, it's gang warfare. Go to hell. You know what gang warfare is? When you drop your military in. Gang warfare is when you send several $1 billion to the Ukraine to fight Russia, and most of the world is sitting it out. If you go follow what happened at the United Nations last week, when you actually watch the speeches at the UN, you find out that most of the world not picking a side. And that means they ain't picking NATO on the United States side. But you wouldn't know that watching the US press, because the US press is handmaiden to the US corporate interests and the US political interests. So, you know, a real gang is when you drop a ton of bombs on somebody. Not what's going on in Haiti. What's going on in Haiti is the people are uprising because they are tired of outside interference, and they're tired of people who have been appointed rather than elected, and they're tired of people who are profiting off of them, who look like them, and the people are suffering. So they're in the streets marching, they're protesting. Well, same thing happens in Burkina Faso, time after time after time. And when the quote-unquote elected leader of Burkina Faso was taken out by a military coup, well, part of the issue was we have border problems and insecurity as it relates to quote unquote Islamic threats, Al-Qaeda, these other groups, which are coming into the country and adding to disruption. And it's problematic. Well, is it completely problematic? Maybe not. How they get there in the first place, who's backing them, who's not backing them, is this a proxy war? But one thing's for sure, I can't walk the streets in Ouagadougou at night. I can't go to my village. I can't go in the country. I get kidnapped. I get, 40% of the country is beyond the reach of the government to protect. So part of these coups is because the people are suffering instability, and the people are suffering literally in the wake of violence that might be able to be prevented. And you have the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. You got the biggest military in the region, Nigeria, and you've got them with their own politics. There's an election coming up in Nigeria shortly, and they've got their own internal problems and their own internal hopes and aspirations. But of course, they're in a world system where these external actors, the same people who put the diamond ads in the New York Times and everywhere else, are looking like, we have interests that don't converge with your interests. Our interest is profit. So if peace brings profit, we don't care who brings the peace. They can have a gun or a suit. They can have a gun and a suit. We don't care. It could be a coup as long as it's peaceful. Ask the people in Egypt right now. The reason we can plan to go back to Egypt is because you had a thug in there for years, Hosni Mubarak. And then the people have the uprising, the so-called Arab Spring, which is hilarious because they don't have springtime in that part of the world, but it's cool. Then you have so the US and them is like, okay, Hosni, you can stay alive. You can go live in your resort up there in Alexandria or on the Red Sea, wherever you want to go, but you got to get the hell out of office. And then they have an elected government. The problem is you elect a cat who is put in power by the Muslim Brotherhood and the United States, and they're like, uh-oh. So they have a coup. And you bring in a military guy, El-Sisi. Sisi comes in with a coup because you don't like the elected guy because, Muslim extremism, whatever you want to say it. But when Sisi comes back in, you can now have the plane start landing back in Cairo. And they can now take the flight to Aswan. Y'all can come back and see the pyramids because we got a guy in power who will shoot everybody, and the United States don't care because we just need somebody to keep it quiet because we're really trying to extract these resources from Northeast Africa. So when you see instability, I always ask, what is the material interest of the external actors? And 10 times out of 10, that's going to tell you who's picking sides in these proxy wars. It's about resources. And so that's what's going on now in Burkina Faso. The instability has led to another member of the military overthrowing the guy who was military, who overthrew the elected person. And now they're saying that because what the current guy is in there now saying is you moving too slow. The thing is still unstable, and the people are suffering, and you saying it's going to take 2 years to turn this back over to civilians, and we're going to have an elected government. Now you're moving too slow. Now the question is, does that mean that this new person is going to stay in there for a long time? But here's the constant, finally, in all these countries. Burkina Faso, if you go back over the last 5 years or so, the young people in particular, they're not having it. So while here in the United States, people got in the streets in summer 2020, they were in the streets in Burkina Faso for years before that. And unlike here, where it's like Black Lives Matter, throw your fist up, put the cardboard sign up, then get back on the subway and go home. These young people burnt the parliament. You see, y'all crooks. They'll burn you. That's why people say Africa is uncivilized. Now, because if you steal an election in Africa, they'll get their machete. If you steal one here, we'll just say, well, damn, did the Rams play Sunday? The point is, they care. We are caught up. We're caught up in the television stuff, you understand? And so, it's kind of sad. But so Burkina, Haiti, of course, y'all saw the speech Putin gave, blaming the West for a lot of stuff. And then you saw, we don't even, we won't even get into that. The elections in Brazil, actually, the elections are Sunday. Looks like Lula da Silva will win if they count votes. If people get to vote and they count them. And when Lula wins, and Lula is not without his problems. One of the problems, I'm reminded of this by one of our colleagues, Jemima Pierre, out on the West Coast, who is herself Haitian, who, along with a lot of other folks, are being reminded that Lula da Silva, who is considered a champion of the working class in Brazil, a champion of Afro-Brazilians in many ways, and it's true. It's also true that Brazil contributed a great number of troops to the UN occupation of Haiti at the behest of the United States. And unless he's going to change his foreign policy as it relates to Haiti, if Lula gets in, they may send more troops to Haiti and mess with Haiti, which is problematic. And that's why, you never put your hopes and faith in any politician. I don't care if it's Lula da Silva or Barack Obama. No individual. These are forces that we have to control by organizing, which is where I want to end for today in a moment, with where I was last night. So it's a lot going on. It's a lot going on in the world. And, in the time since we've seen each other, it's an interesting convergence. I was in virtually, like I said, the Kemetic Institute for Health Human Development in Columbia, South Carolina. We had a conversation. There's a lot of Nubians there as well. That's the beautiful thing about virtual. People can go everywhere. And Thursday night, and the topic we were discussing is, who is an American? Who is an American? And we've had that conversation many times. And, in fact, a friend of mine, acquaintance, Deneen Brown, published in the Sunday Washington Post, last Sunday's Washington Post magazine, a long article entitled "The Case for Leaving America to Escape Racism." And she's talking about Africa primarily. So she quotes me, she quotes my colleague Alice Thomas over at Howard Law School, and we kind of occupy two ends of the continuum. My end of the continuum is like, hey, why not? There are a lot of people who are thinking about it, and I think about it every day. On the other end is Alice, Professor Thomas, who says, yeah, I'm not going anywhere because my skills are needed here now more than ever to fight. Here's the problem. Both things can be true. In fact, both are true. I'm sitting in the U.S. right now. And now, if you tell me right now that I had the resources and material, then next Saturday we will be opening from lovely Accra or Kumasi. Not Cape Town so much. If I want to go to San Francisco, I'll go to San Francisco in the United States. I don't need to fly halfway around the world, go to San Francisco. Maybe Joburg, but maybe Dakar. It depends, or maybe somewhere nice and country, like where my mama came from, and we just make sure we got the electronic hookup, got the internet hookup, and we go from there. Because more and more people are doing that. So Deneen wrote a long article in the Washington Post about that. And it's becoming more public facing. By public facing, I mean social structure facing now. People don't have these connections. So we talked a little bit about that on Thursday night. Who is American? And then last night, because of course, Prof, I don't know, did you ever find yourself have the occasion to either be a panelist or came down to cover or just came to see what was going on at the Congressional Black Caucus weekend at any point?
Never found myself to do that ever.
It's so funny. My coffee. The CBC weekend, which of course is most of a week of panels and conversations culminating in the soirees, and then every night, the liquor flows freely. But it's fascinating because these representatives convene panels, and a lot of the people who come to participate are people who are doing some incredible work. Like, for example, this week, and I was in class, I couldn't get down this week. I've gone down a couple of times. I've been on a couple of panels. One time I went down at the behest of my, as they say in Philly, my young bull, who, of course, I say that affectionately because he is known to the social structure as Councilman Isaiah Thomas, who was one of our Freedom School students back in 1999, one of the original. He was 16 years old. Frankfurt High School, my man Isaiah, who is now on the Philadelphia City Council. And he's part of that group. In fact, Malcolm Kenyatta was there. He had a convening of Pennsylvania young lawmakers, the women and men who are in that next generation. And our relationship goes back, as I said, 20-some years. So he texted me and said, Dr. Card, would you mind coming down and giving us some historical perspective on, what you think about how we're trying to move? I said, come on, man, I do anything for you, Isaiah. That's my man. He fights every day for Black people, brown people, poor people, working class. He's doing everything he can. And there are a few people on that Philadelphia City Council who make it their business to let everybody know that's what they're doing. So I'm sure Isaiah was here. I'm sure Malcolm Kenyatta was here. I mean, they come. And so there's that strata. And Bobby Rush had a panel on practical policy lessons to learn from the Black Panther Party. Because, of course, we know Bobby Rush was a Panther. Now he's in Congress now. He's about to cycle out, retire. But he brought together, ex-Panthers, people who are doing work now. Some of them it's the same people, young people, to talk about what lessons do we learn from free breakfast program, from sickle cell screening. And so the face of it is the Congressional Black Caucus and celebrities and other. But underneath that, the real value of those spaces often is the discussions that are being had and the people you run into incidentally. Because I met all those young legislators, city council people, Pittsburgh, Philly, like I said, the state house people like Kenyatta and them. I wouldn't have met them had I not gone down there because Isaiah said, we need you. So I'll come down. I'll be there. So that's the value. Now, you got to get past all the other stuff because it will make you vomit. No question. Because you see the madness. All of it's there. I mean, we're quite comfortable, which is where I want to end for today. Because on the occasion of this Congressional Black Caucus formation, I was asked by the co-director of this documentary, which, I mean, we should talk to see if we get a screen here. Why is We Americans? This is the poster.
I love it.
It's really something. And of course, these your people, Prof. It's the whole documentary is on the history of the Baraka family, which is the history of Newark.
Oh, Newark, yes.
Newark, but straight Newark. Of course, Mama Mina Baraka, a force who still walks the earth. Her husband, companion, comrade, the great Amiri Baraka, who made transition in 2014, and their son, the mayor of Newark. Well, the whole family. But Ras is featured in the movie, of course. Lauren Hill is an executive producer. And last night, the co-directors, who were Udi Oloni and Ayanna Morris, convened this along with the help of what's the name of that? Audible. In fact, There's a free book, free audio book that you can download from Audible now called The Book of Baraka. It is Ras, Mayor Baraka, talking with Jelani Cobb, who's now the dean of journalism at Columbia. But they were Howard together, and Ras had me cracking up talking about how he ended up getting to Howard because his daddy went to Howard, he never graduated, and but anyways, there's so many stories. But that book is free, and I encourage you to listen to it. I say book, but it's really a conversation. It's really Ras narrating his life through the history of his parents, through the history of his community, and as you know, Prof. And I never get tired of the energy of them Brick City Negroes. Newark don't play that. That's why we could go to St. Rocco's when they attacked Leonard Jefferson in Manhattan. They was like, no problem. Harlem, y'all come to Newark. Now, if them people want to attack you, we invite them. Why don't you come? You know what I'm saying? And let's dance. But at any rate, this film does an excellent job of narrating really the history of Newark and the history of Black political power. So as you can imagine, all the highlights are there. The insurrections of 67, 68. So Larry Ham is in there. A lot of people, though. A lot of rank and file people. They got Roxanne Shante in there. I mean, it's like, what? And you see her in this, she invites these young girls in, and they do a trio, not a duet, but a trio on, you best go about your way and have a nice day. But the young girls, I'm looking at these teenagers, they're like probably 13, 14 years old. They know all the words, and she's letting them perform and back and forth. And then she embraces them and says, the next generation. You see the campaigns. And of course, after the film, we had a conversation. And what Ayanna wanted me to do, Ayanna Morris, who was a native of Newark, the co-director, what she wanted me to do was moderate the conversation between She Udi, and Mayor Baraka Ras. So it was the three of them, and I kind of moderated a conversation after that on Why Is We Americans. And of course, that's the name of a very famous Mayor Baraka poem, Why Is We Americans, which is, oh my God, it is brilliant. He did an excerpt from it that is very famous. Y'all can find on YouTube. It was performed, that excerpt, at Def Jam, Def Poetry Jam. Mos Def brings him on, the elder Baraka, and he opens with John Coltrane. Because a lot of his poetry, he would put music accompaniments by humming something. So when he comes in, he's like, biddy-da, biddy-da. And he says, what I want is me, for real. So why is we Americans? He answers that in the first line. What I want is me, for real. Meaning what? I want me, I want us, for real. I don't want you. So you talk about why is we American. And then he goes through the litany of abuses of what this country has done. And then he talks about what it would look like if we got what we want. And in the Audible book, one of the first things Ras says is, I grew up in a household where you can reduce our politics to 3 simple questions. And this is one thing I love about Ras Baraka, among many other things. He's an artist, really, a poet, like his parents, both of his parents. I mean, have you ever heard of Mina do her poetry? Mama Mina. You can state something very simply and communicate a universe of ideology. So Ras said, he said, and this is the opening question I asked him after we got, through the film we talking. I said, I'm gonna keep this short because I want to get people in the audience to ask questions, because this is a communal conversation. So I'm just gonna start with something that you always say, Mr. Mayor. He said there are 3 questions that animate my politics. What do we want? What do we need? And how can we get it? That's beautiful. That's just the simplest. What do we want? What do we need? And how do we get it? Now, of course, that opens up the can of worms, because who is we? But it exposes the interests. And so that opened up a conversation on Why Is We Americans. And we'll talk about that another time. Maybe I'll talk some more about it on Office Hours Monday night. So, the numbers continue to grow. And it's beautiful to have thousands plus in that space on Monday, just really having conversation and people coming in, adding their commentary, adding their experiences. So I think maybe we want to devote some time Monday to working through that. And actually, I'm going to ask Ayanna, with your, I don't know, Prof, maybe I'll just say this live now. It might be interesting to see if she would, screen it and come, because, the intergenerational conversation is just brilliant. And, you know, I only asked them a couple of questions apiece before we went right to the audience because, like I said, I wanted to get out of the way. And there was a lot of Newark kids in the room and a lot of Nubians. That's why I saw Ndoku. That's why I saw Aya. That's why I saw Adesoje. Adesoje was across the pond. He came over here. Man, what's going on, bro? Yeah, I was like, look at Adesoje. I mean, it was crazy because they all came. So, you know, as I was saying, I said to the mayor last night that, you know, everything sounds, feels, looks eminently reasonable. Everything you're talking about, clean drinking water, and I brought that up too because, of course, he's good friends with Chokwe Lumumba, Antar Lumumba, the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, and he told them the story last night of how he was coming to the State of the Black World meeting that was held in D.C. back in, that must have been 20. When was he elected? 14?
I think it was 14.
I don't remember. Yeah, well, maybe, yeah, because but it was he was elected the same year that Chokwe Lumumba was elected mayor of Jackson. Chokwe Lumumba, the father, you know, who was, you know, one of my heroes, radical lawyer, man, it was my man. But at any rate, Chokwe made transition not too long after that. He died in office, and but Raz said I got off the train at Newark at Union Station in D.C. and I got in the cab. I was getting ready to get in the cab. And who am I standing next to? And we rode up to Howard together because they had the State of the Black World Conference. I remember that in Blackburn Center in Howard. But Chokwe Lumumba, not Antar, not Chokwe Antar, the current mayor, his father. And he said shortly after that, you know, we talked about, you know, our politics, and he said, you know, I won the election. A little bit later, he said, I don't believe in accidents. I said, I don't either, brother. There are no such things. There are no accidents. And so I was very moved by this conversation on why are we Americans. And in a week when we see a renewed focus on all of this anti-CRT stuff and book banning, the question of why are we Americans is very, very salient. It's something that we should never keep far from our minds. And by that, I mean, you know, if you look at Baba Amiri, if you look at Amiri Baraka's piece, you'll see that what he does is lay out what a society would look like. And then at the end of his poem, he says, you know, only then, only after all that, can we talk about being Americans. You know, we talk about being American because it don't mean nothing. Now, Ras would tell you, he said, I'm an American, you know, my father and mother are Americans. And he said, but that don't mean that we are not also human beings in the world, that we are not also Africans, and that's very clear. You know, his mom says in the film, he said, I'm a Marxist. And I was laughing. I told him last night, I said, I think V.I. Lenin should probably get an interview credit because I've seen his picture in the back at y'all house like a half dozen times in this movie. I mean, and if you know, anyway, I won't get too deep into that. We can talk about that more.
No, we have to get it. Just, you know, make the introduction. The team do it. And yeah, I mean, I'm so impressed that we have a space where we can have conversations around movies, conversations around documentaries with the documentarians themselves, and then watch it together with the chat open. People are chatting, and then afterwards deconstruct. The people, like with Omi's movie, people came in to ask her questions about it afterwards, and it was beautiful in this format. We can do it freely. So yes, the answer is I'm never going to say no.
No, I mean, that's the beautiful thing. Okay, well, good. Then I'll do that today. I'll make the introduction, and then, you know, you all can move from there. Because again, I mean, you know, this is, you know, obviously you get funding from wherever you get it. It's made the film festival circuits, but the film is really governance. And it comes down to that simple proposition that brings us back to where we started. There are the social structure engagements that we must do. Today, for example, October the 1st, unless I miss my memory, is Fannie Lou Hamer's birthday. And of course, we spent a lot of time with Ms. Hamer. We talked about the recent materials by her. We actually read and heard her words, including the time that she appeared in New York on the same stage as Malcolm X, when they were preceded that night by the Snick Singer singing Oginga Odinga, about when Oginga Odinga came from Kenya in the government of Jomo Kenyatta and came to Atlanta. And the white liberals in Atlanta tried to convince him that, you know, Atlanta doesn't have any race prejudice. And then black students in SNCC was like, yeah, okay. We went down to the Peachtree Manor to see Oginga Odinga. And the police said, what's the matter to see Oginga Odinga? Police said, you know, look at this. What's going on? And say, yeah, this is our brother. We're going to make sure that he know what y'all doing over here. Well, that's in the same spirit. So Mrs. Hamer, who visited West Africa, as we talked about, who said, this is where my ancestors came from, who immediately identified with and locked in to those African people over there, who, as we talked about, she then commented to the white Peace Corps workers who she saw over there, why y'all over here? Y'all need to be back at home where you live, where you came from, working to fight the stuff here. We don't need you over here. You need to go over there where you came from, fight them people, fight for them people. You come over here and help Africans. I mean, it's almost like, I don't know, maybe like Michelle Pfeiffer in Dangerous Minds. But anyway, the point is that, Fannie Lou Hamer has a public facing side, a social structure facing side, and then a governance formation she comes out of. And that's very important. Well, the same thing with a brother whose birthday he will spend locked up unjustly, which is the 4th of October, and that's Hubert Rap Brown. H. Rap Brown, and maybe we'll end with this for today, because there's so much that I'm working through, and I think maybe next week I want to spend some time with this book that just came out on textbooks. I talked about this a little bit earlier in the week with my sister and comrade Shana Terrell with the Center for Black Educator Development, Teaching White Supremacy, America's Democratic Ordeal and the Forging of Our National Identity, Donald Yakovon. I'm not encouraging anybody to go spend any money on this book. I go broke enough, but I'm just saying, because now, I mean, what we clearly see in social structure and white publishing is there has been an explosion of self-congratulatory "we're racist" books. So, they've discovered Native America again. So all these books are coming out now, a rewriting of the history of America with Native Americans at the center. Okay, that's cool. Now that this cat right here goes through the curriculum wars and goes through the establishment of white supremacy in the curriculum. And okay, so of course I buy these books and I read these books primarily for the footnotes. These are the kind of books I'll read the footnotes first. I'll start with the bibliography. I'll take my pencil, check off all the books I have. And then the ones I don't have, I decide whether I need to get those books in that. And then I'll start with the footnotes and go through each page of footnotes in detail to see what sources I didn't know. Then I'll go back and read the narrative, because the least important thing in a book like this, as far as I'm concerned, is your interpretation.
Come on.
I don't give a damn how you see. This is what I'm saying. The most brilliant. No. Let me see the footnotes. Let me see the bibliography. Now this book here, Jones. Pick up a book like this. I know what his politics are based on reading the conclusion and the introduction. Once I'm satisfied that his politics align with the governance formation, I will then read the bibliography, read the footnotes, then go back. But this time I'm going to read in detail, because academics are not combatants. I know academics like to pretend to be combatants. So they'll go to the panel, they'll go stay in the hotel, they'll get the honorarium, and then they'll sit and talk to each other about how revolutionary they are. It's great. I've done it myself. But don't mistake that for what Ras was talking about last night, which is where I want to end. We'll talk more about this on Monday night in detail, I think. Ideology, as Ras was saying last, now mind you, now I want to just say this though. Just let me tell, not even a long time. Take 30 seconds. I promise you. Let me discipline myself today. Ras's parents, his siblings' parents, are two of the most remarkable human beings that our communities have produced in the last century. Amina Baraka, her humanity, her warmth, her generosity. This is a sister who started a black school in her house there in New York. And there's a clip in the film where they go through the ABCs, but each one of the letters represents something black, represents something powerful. So like you get to J and she says, and what we don't have in this society is, and then all these children, it's like 20 children, justice. And then they go to the next, and black boys are K, king. Then they get to Q, little black girl, you are queens and everything. I mean, resources. I mean, all this stuff. And these are children, like some of them like 3-4 years old, right? Including all of their children. Amiri Baraka, people don't even scratch the surface of Amiri. Now, I was telling Ras last night, I asked about his daughter, his oldest child, because Amanla, who is in the film, who helped make the film, He said she's doing filmmaking now. She's somewhere in the country making film. I said, asked because she was in my class back in 2010. In fact, I remember sitting next to Baba Amiri. He was on campus. He said, "Man, thanks for looking at my granddaughter." I said, "Man, I can't show my face in the known world if I mess over your grandchild." So, but this is the governance formation. So, what Ras Baraka was saying last night was, in other words, these are people who, and I won't get into it now, but clearly very ideologically committed, very powerful. They tell the story in the film about how they emerged out of the 50s and 60s in the Black Power movement. I would encourage you, if you can get your hands on it, maybe a paperback version is a little bit cheaper. My friend and brother Michael Samanga, who has been at Georgia State for a while, called Amiri Baraka and the Congress of African Peoples. The film starts with Baraka in 1972 at Gary, Indiana, at the National Black Political Convention. Very conference. We're on the 50th anniversary of Gary, 72 there. But all of that ideology, all the splits, all the tensions, all the convergences, the operational unity, that whole story. And there are fewer and fewer people around who were there in those conversations, whether it be James Turner, who just made transition, or Malana Karenga, who's still around. Elsie Scott, who's down at Howard, who attended the Gary Conference. We're going to do something around Gary in the next month or so. The point I'm trying to make is all of that ideology is the foundation out of which the subsequent ways of activism emerged, not just in the United States, but in 74, they meet in Tanzania, the Sixth Pan-African Congress. Those things still percolate. But what Ras was saying last night is, oh, that's well and good. But that lady just had her lights turned off. This young brother or sister coming to school to eat because they ain't had nothing to eat at home. He said, my father and mother could walk the streets and people say, we love what you do. And we support you. How can we organize this kind of thing? But when I walk the street, it's like, I need a job. He said that shrinks the universe of ideology down very quickly. And this is where I'd probably depart with some of my dear friends who are ideologically brilliant, but ain't nobody asking them for a job. They asking Ras Baraka for a job.
Facts.
You see what I'm saying? So he said, wow, my mother says I'm a Marxist, and I might be sitting here like, yeah, me too. Okay, yeah, so how are we going to get this water back on? And we talked about water last night, because it ain't just, as we know, as you know, it ain't just Jackson, it ain't just Flint, it's Newark too. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Our people are suffering. And so we can have our politics pristine, but how are we going to get services to it? What do we want? What do we need? And how can we get it? That shrinks it down. Rap Brown, who the police caught in Lowndes County, Alabama, because that's where he had gone as a young man when he joined SNCC, and they went out there to organize in Lowndes County, Alabama, not too far from Tuskegee. Rap Brown, who I think I should have a copy of. Yeah, these are his two books, and I've showed y'all these before, but I keep them around. Here's his semi-autobiography, whose title you can read for yourself. And which actually, in Revolution by the Book, The Rap is Live, which he published just before he was accused of this crime in Atlanta, west end of Atlanta, right around the corner from the AUC, he didn't commit. He says, it was from watching white people, what they had and what we had, that I learned about this country. Brown wrote in his part autobiography, part political handbook, Die, N-Word, Die. He says, I lived near Louisiana State University. He's from Baton Rouge. Shout out, by the way, to the basketball coach at Louisiana State. What's her name?
Kim Mulkey?
Yeah. Really. It's very important to support your former players that made your
crusty, dried.
But what I love is, and look, now we can set aside whether Brittany Griner is caping for politics or whatever. She locked up. We can set aside whether she should have had the stuff in her bag. Kay Mulkey, MAGA. I love the fact that when she had got no comment on this player that gave her an undefeated season at Baylor, and now she at LSU picking at Black Cotton to make some more money. I love that them sisters and other people, like everybody, was like, okay, Black women, when you're considering Louisiana State University, look at that coach. See, y'all gonna mess around a minute, and I pray it's a quick minute. You're gonna mess around and break it. You're gonna break it. Because what you're talking about Black people is, we don't give a damn about America or nothing else. What do we want? What do we need? And how can we get it? Do I need to wrap this flag patch on my shoulder? No problem. because I got something I want for my mother, my father, my community. What do we need, and how can we get it? This is what Ras is dealing with. So finally, Rap Brown says, I live near Louisiana State University, and I could see this big fine school with modern buildings, and it was for whites. Then there was Southern University, which was about to fall in, and that was for the N-words. And when I compared the two, the message that the white man was trying to get across was obvious. Die, nigga, die. That's why he named his book, Die, nigga, die. Every message they sending, the funding you won't get in my alma mater, Tennessee State, the fact that you punk Tate Reeves, you punk governor of punk ass Mississippi, making sure that you and your predecessor, Bryant, make sure that y'all football playing buddy siphons off money that taken from the mouths of people who need the money to eat, and make sure that his daughter's volleyball got a new volleyball thing to play in after the high school you tricked out. Y'all can go to hell. Why is we Americans? This is what Amiri is asking. Until this, and this? No. And then he says, then we can talk about being Americans. He said, what we want out of our nostrils is the stench of what you've done. And he said, only then can we talk about being Americans after we have satiated the desire to set your ass on fire. He said, but in order for us to have that kind of dampen, you got to do more than wave a flag and talk about the founding fathers, your founding fathers. And so, I think as we go into this coming up week, we have to remember that so much has changed and so much hasn't changed. And I think, and also, I should say one other thing. Also, we should also be mindful of. Oh,
no, I'll do it. That's okay.
Please.
That's all right. October 6th is Fannie Lou Hamer's birthday. The reason why I know it is because it's the day that I started on Sirius XM in 2014. It's my anniversary on the airwaves, and I sit on that day in honor of that woman. So I know that there's something ordained about my presence on that star that I sit on every day, 3 hours, Monday through Friday, 3 to 6. Those of you who do not have Sirius XM, get the app, download it. It is worth your dime, your coin to be a member of the Urban View family all throughout the day.
Yeah.
From Joe Madison to Larry Daniel Favors to Heather B to Clay Kane to me.
Yeah.
Saturday and Sunday included.
It's civics lesson on there, right?
Sunday Civics is on Sunday. We got Pastor Soaries on Sunday too. He kicks it off preaching. Pastor Buster Soaries. We got Omi Bell. We got Dr. Robin on Sundays. We have Shermichael, who's probably going to be moving to Saturdays. We're going to announce some more. We're going to bring some more people in. Because when we spend money, we should get fed. We should get more. We should get everything. So.
And by the way, the event last night started at 5. So it was rush hour, Prof. When this black man stopped me in the middle of the street talking about, I'm listening to Karen right now. So, bro, it's traffic. Oh, I'm about to get hit in the street. But I had to go over and get that man a pound. So, yes, invest y'all money. No question. Serious.
Yeah.
We had that conversation last week.
Yeah. On this day, though, Morgan State and Kentucky State were founded. So, October 1st is very special. So.
You know what? We remember we talked about Roy Wilkins. So, Kentucky State in Frankfort, Kentucky, and of course, what they call the national treasure, Morgan State. It was some Morgan. In fact, James Morgan, my man, James Morgan's a grad student at Morgan State. He did his undergrad at Howard. He's from Newark. So he came last night because he said the Baraka family means a lot to me because when I was a teenager, remember Ras was a teacher. He said I was a substitute teacher. I was a teacher. I was assistant principal. I was a principal. There's a powerful moment. I'm gonna make this very quick. There's a powerful moment when he says in the documentary, he's in the school gym at his high school where he's the principal, and there's been another shooting. And remember, his sister was killed in gun violence. I remember that night because Sonia Sanchez came to talk to our Freedom School students, and she was a little late. I'm outside waiting for her in West Philly, and I said, "What happened, Mama Sonia?" So I just got off the phone with the Barakas. Shadi been killed. Straight domestic violence, a stalker. It was terrible. And and Ras reads a poem in the film where you see they kill my baby sister. They kill my. It just tear your heart out. You know what I'm saying? But Johnson C. Smith, by the way, she's a graduate of Johnson C. Smith. But anyway, as I was saying, he's in the gym, somebody been shot, and you see all the students in the bleachers, and he's on the floor with the microphone. He says, "You should never get used to this, y'all. He said, they will tell you that Black Death, this is just what we do. He says, not what we do. This is not natural. I don't want you all to tune out. I want you all, we'll grieve together, but please, we must know that this is not the life. This is not the life that was meant for you. This is not our life. It is the reality now, but we must change. And he ended with that. He says, I believe, I know from my whole life that we can win. But we will only win if we're disciplined, if we're organized. I mean, which is very powerful. Okay, all the books, all the ideology, but at the end of the day, we can win. We're winning right now. So
Yeah.
I'm with that.
I was gonna end with Stevie, but
Yeah.
y'all could go watch Pastime Paradise. I think this is more poignant.
Oh,
Given what you set up and lined up for us. So I just want to say thank you as always.
thank you.
I never know where we're going to go, but I get in happily into this vehicle every single week.
No,
you know, on because you know it's going to be some shade. I'm going to put my seatbelt on and my sunglasses.
But you know what? I love it. You did that. You brought in our brother Kwame Alexander. Hey, the ancestors in charge. Look at Black Dante.
Always look at him. Look at him.
Look at Black Dante, the mighty Most Def.
Nubian, see y'all on the Nubian streets tomorrow with Dr. Senyata, and Monday, of course, office hours with Dr. Carr and the Metanetra on Tuesday, and on and on and on and on. The beat.
Come on now. Come on.
I won't do it. I won't do it.
But you know what? So funny. Mama Amina Baraka, her enslaved name, Sylvia Robinson. So when you quote Sugar Hill Gang, of course, another Sylvia Robinson who started, the ancestors are just, they got jokes. Anyway.
Love you.
Love you.
Very